The Arlington Carmelite Nuns are back in the news after I thought we'd be done talking about them. It made no sense that they would be back in the news yet again, because if you remember this story, I'll give you the brief overview and we'll talk about a news article and then their response to it. The basics of this story go like this. The Arlington Carmelite Nuns allegedly had some weird stuff going on at their monastery, if you want to call it that, their convent. And there were reports that got back to the bishop. There were some allegations made, an admission of violating vows made by the prioress of the Arlington Carmel, given under duress. And by duress, I actually mean literally she went in for surgery, was still under the effects of the anesthesia, and the bishop actually grilled her while under those effects and got her to say all kinds of weird, outlandish stuff. You could tell by the way I'm saying that I don't believe this story in the slightest, because no legal process would ever accept a admission of guilt given under those circumstances. It simply would not happen. There were other issues there as well, and Bishop Olson decided to essentially try to replace some other superior, which led to a whole bunch of drama, including bringing a very, very much more liberal nun than these Carmelite nuns to become the mother superior of the organization without the consent, essentially, of the nuns. That's kind of a very, very quick version of this. And at the heart of this is property. See, the Arlington Carmel is a rather large, sprawling campus located in a very choice neighborhood. It could be developed into or sold to developers for a very pretty penny. And I bring up property in all of this because the nuns bring up property in their defense and for what they have chosen to do in response. Because the track record is, anywhere you go in the world, when a traditional or conservative religious order, typically nuns, but sometimes monks, become the targets of Rome, what happens? And by the Rome, usually it's the local bishop working with Rome. If they're successful in crushing the religious order, sending the members to other religious orders, the property is seized and sold to developers. It's part of the track record. And the nuns have picked up on this. They're not ignorant of the situation. But when they chose to resist them, it led to a long, complicated process that now has the nuns openly saying they do not respect the authority or recognize the authority of Bishop Olson, and have aligned themselves with the Society of St. Pius X to receive sacraments, meaning they are now an SSPX organization. In fact, if you actually look their address up, you'll see that it very clearly says SSPX on their websites, on addresses, everything. And you would think that would be the end of the story, because once you go SSPX, unless you walk away from it and join up with Ecclesia Dei organizations, the FSSP as an example, that's the end of it. Once you go there, the bishop can't really do much to you because the secular authorities never want to get involved. The story should have ended there. That should have been a story anytime you heard myself or somebody like me referencing the story would be to compare a future case like that of the Arlington Carmelite Nuns. But the bishop in this story could not leave well enough alone. And this is the problem. Master Padre with the joke in the chat says, you slimmed up the bishop quite a bit for this thumbnail, is he? The head on the bishop is him. The other body is just another picture of another priest or something my wife found. So note that his head is a little large on the thumbnail. But I'm going to give you what happened here. See, according to a report published yesterday in Catholic Review, as well as on our Sunday Visitor and a bunch of other places, but we had storms in my area last night. My internet has been really iffy. I'm surprised this is even working right now. Bishop Olson could not leave well enough alone. He wants their property so badly that he sent a letter to the nuns telling them that he has dismissed the 7 nuns in question from the religious life and released them from their vows. They're free to go live as laity. As if that was going to work to get them to leave. If anything, what these sisters have shown is that they have a spine and are willing to fight. They have the courage of their convictions. And remember, when you're talking about vowed religious who spend their days in prayer for the most part and really don't want the publicity, judging from all the statements I've read to you from them so far, they understand that that there could be spiritual consequences for this, but they have united themselves in prayer and to discern the route ahead. And they've decided that what God wants for them is not to give in to the local ordinary. You might think that's, for those of you not aware of the situation, that might seem a little outlandish. After all, St. Paul tells us to be united to our bishop. Sure, that's always a great idea. In fact, that's generally, under normal circumstances, required. Because under normal circumstances, you're not going to have a bishop doing the things that he's done to them. Or, as an example, but well before this happened, in Texas, because this is all in Texas, they were having political contests getting ready to go on, and the movement for basic human common sense, a group of people who they pray outside of what I call the temples of Moloch. They try to stop people from engaging in the sacrifice of the living to Moloch. Got to be careful how you talk about that here. But there were organizations in Texas that priests and Catholic and lay people were openly endorsing those the candidates who allied themselves with that. And the bishop came out and said, no, don't do that. You try to have a broader view. Okay? Once a bishop does that, whatever. He has surrendered his authority, because as soon as you do anything as a priest or a bishop to cozy up even a little bit to the seamless garment heresy, you have shown yourself to have no moral authority, that your moral compass is utterly broken. And that is kind of important in understanding the story, that this bishop doesn't exactly represent Catholic morality very well. If you need any proof of that, he could have left the nuns alone. So we go here to Catholic Review for the headline. Nuns in Arlington, Texas, dismissed from Carmelite order, religious life. Sort of. I'll put an asterisk next to that because, again, the bishop has no moral authority, clearly has no moral authority, and the nuns have given their property to the control of laity, a nonprofit group of laity, to protect themselves, which is something you often see with SSPX aligned organizations, and the nuns have openly recognized the SSPX, and the SSPX have very quietly give them the sacraments through a priest who arrives assumingly on Sundays to give them the Mass and for their daily Mass needs as well. I personally don't know how close an SSPX priory or chapel is to them in the Arlington area. Let me know if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, if there's an SSPX chapel within a reasonable drive, which I would count as about 2.5 hours each way. And let me know if that's the case, because they could just be showing up to Mass there. Again, I don't know the specifics when it comes to that, but they get their sacraments from the SSPX. The SSPX happily give that to them, which means they also recognize the authority of the bishops of the SSPX. That should have closed the case on this, other than maybe a stern warning from the bishop, which he did issue to laity saying, oh, you shouldn't go there, because a lot of the bad bishops really do love repeating that silly line that you hear from some of them, that the SSPX are bad. That's usually part of my litmus test for if someone gets the situation in the church or not, is what they think of the SSPX. But here's some of the details for your consideration on this story before we go to the response from the nuns. Quote, members of a women's religious community in Arlington, Texas have been dismissed, I'll put in quotes, from the Carmelite order and Catholic religious life, according to October 28th statements from Bishop Michael F. Olson of Fort Worth and Mother Marie of the Incarnation, whom a Vatican office, meaning Francis and Fernandez, appointed as the community's major superior in April. The bishop and major superior attributed the dismissal to the nuns' decisions to, quote, break faith with their mother, the Church of Rome, through denying the authority of the Vatican dicastery for institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life that comes from the Pope, as well as that of their bishop and the dicastery-appointed major superior. In rejecting Mother Marie of the Incarnation's authority, they also rejected the Order of Discalced Carmelites, whose rule and constitutions they have spurned and practiced in multiple ways. Mother Marie of the Incarnation wrote in her October 28th statement to the faithful of the Diocese of Fort Worth. We'll pause here. Part of the issue here, and the crushing of religious orders, really took on new life after a document called Cor Orans was issued in 2018. What it did was take religious orders that are similar and place them into congresses, where a lot of their governance issues would be done collectively. You might not wonder, why does that matter? Well, because let's use Carmelites as an example. Here we're talking about traditional Carmelites. Traditional sacraments, traditional charisms, cloistered as in like they spend most of their time praying and doing other things that, before about 1962 would have been recognized as the behavior of religious in the Catholic Church. And that group was placed in the same congresses as pantsuit wearing, self-described Carmelites who, to borrow a line from Pope Francis, go out and make a mess of things. You would recognize immediately that this is kind of a problem, and those other groups had authority over them, essentially. The entire point of Cor Orans was to rein in the traditional religious, to essentially Vatican II up them, to make them more synodal, to use the more contemporary parlance. And this Mother Maria of the Incarnation was appointed as such as to run this organization, to run the Arlington Carmelites by that Congress, basically, with the backing of Rome. She was not exactly a member of their community. She was a Bergoglian. Let's go back to this. The nuns also entered September 14th into an unlawful formal association with the Society of St. Pius X, a traditionalist religious order in irregular communion with Rome, and soon after illicitly transferred ownership of their monastery of the Most Holy Trinity to a nonprofit organization of lay people, the statement noted. Here's Mother Maria, who, quoting her directly, "I declare with great sorrow that the nuns of the monastery of the Most Holy Trinity are no longer members of the order of Discalced Carmelites," Mother Maria of the Incarnation wrote. "I ask for your continued prayers and sacrifices on behalf of these 7 women who have reverted to the lay state by their own actions." The affected nuns did not immediately respond on their website, which has been their mainstay for public communication over the past 18 months, as they have openly fought with Bishop Olson following his allegations in April 2023 that their community-elected prioress, Mother Teresa Agnes Gerlach, had committed unspecified sins against chastity. Again, what they never tell you is that her confession was given under duress and under a situation that no free country would have allowed in their court system, because you'll say anything under medication. The nuns filed a lawsuit against the bishop, launching a feud that has involved both civil and church courts as well as law enforcement. It included allegations that the bishop wanted access to the nuns' donor list or property, and that the nuns were engaged in the illegal use of a certain plant that got very in vogue in the 1960s. The bishop has also placed various restrictions on the nuns' access to the sacraments and the monastery's access to the public. The dispute included a June 2023 court hearing that revealed the bishop had investigated Mother Teresa Agnes for breaking chastity vows via phone communication with a priest of the Diocese of Raleigh, North Carolina. She denied the allegation and has attributed to her poor physical health and mental state what she described as a horrible, horrible mistake in an April 2023 audio recording. That's the one given under duress. The unspecified admission played in court was made during Bishop Olson's questioning of her during his visit to the monastery at the start of his investigation. End quote. His visit was right after she got out of surgery. Again, the courts would never take this stuff. But at the heart of this is property, despite whatever Bishop Olson might say on the matter. You see, I went onto you can go look at neighborhoods online and find out what the property values are, and that property is worth a lot of money, a lot. And this is always at the heart of these cases. Aside from the desire from Rome to sweep away Catholicism for their synodal church, meaning you have to get rid of all the vestiges of it, which has been their program for the last decade or longer, it's a basic issue here also of property. Dallas-Fort Worth has got a lot that they owe on the McCarrick problems. Go back to that problem, and how did dioceses respond? By opening up their wallets. They began selling properties to pay out for the court cases they kept losing. A lot of dioceses owe a lot of money. In some other cases, the dioceses are just greedy. They just want the money because laity aren't opening their wallets anymore. And haven't been for about 20 years now, which is having some predictable consequences in a lot of places. And property always comes up in these stories. Every single time without fail. Much as he likes to deny it. Again, the man who told people to broaden your view of things and don't align yourself with politicians who are anti-Moloch. That guy, that same bishop. Even the article touches on that a little bit and notes that the bishop denies this. And he has consistently denied this from the beginning because it looks awful. He says, quote, The nuns' monastery is located within the boundaries of the Fort Worth Diocese, which Bishop Olson has led since 2014. He was one of the first appointed by Francis. He sought in June 2023 to dismiss Mother Teresa Agnes from the Carmelite order, but she appealed his decree and it was nullified in May 2024 by the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, which oversees matters pertaining to consecrated religious life. The nuns have publicly rejected the governance authority of the Holy See granted by Bishop Olson in May 2023, and in May 2024 they filed a restraining order, which they later withdrew, against Bishop Olson and the Carmelite Association of Christ the King, a small organization of U.S. Carmelite monasteries to which the Arlington Carmelites belonged. That's the organization under Core Orange, if I'm not mistaken. Mother Maria of the Incarnation, which belongs to a Carmelite community in Minnesota, is the association's president. In his October 28th statement, Bishop Olson reiterated that the diocese makes no claim and has never made a claim to the property and assets of the monastery. He also repeated his request for Catholics not to attend Mass or other services there, nor support the monastery financially. The monastery of the Most Holy Trinity sits on 72 acres in what the nuns described in their initial lawsuit as a, quote, quiet, wooded, secluded location, where as of April 2023, around 50 people joined them for daily Mass, with at least 10 more joining them for Sunday Mass. They described their community as including their prioress, 7 sisters, 2 novices, women in formation to take vows. As cloistered contemplative nuns, they have lived apart from the world to dedicate their lives to prayer. End quote. The Vatican is actually openly hostile to cloistered religious. Francis wants them to go out and make a mess of things. I'm paraphrasing what he has said explicitly on this issue before. But again, the basic of this story. Bishop Olson issued a letter removing 7 sisters from the religious life. Their community is made up of their prioress, 7 sisters, and 2 novices. What would that do? That would destroy the order. Gone. Wiped off the map. So, of course, they're not going to submit to this because it's absolutely a horrifyingly bad thing he's trying to do. I do wonder what our Lord thinks of bishops who try to erase prayerful religious communities. I'm sure Bishop Olson will find out one day. Here's the statement in response issued yesterday from the Mother Prioress. Very, very short. Does not go long. Read the last one to you about 6 weeks ago when this made the news before. But here is the response from the woman that Bishop Olson just believed hearsay about and invalid confessions. Praise be Jesus Christ now and forever. The statement posted on the Diocese of Fort Worth website on October 28th concerning us require urgent clarification. What began in April 2023 with a false accusation against our Mother Prioress, and that has been pursued relentlessly since then by Bishop Olson for his own ends, has been compounded over time, so that we have now reached the point where it is asserted that we are dismissed from religious life and that we have somehow defected notoriously from the faith. These assertions are egregiously false. That's a quote from him directly, that they have defected notoriously from the faith. Given our recent acceptance for association by the Society of St. Pius X last August, any dismissal declared by Mother Maria of the Association of Christ the King is a moot point. The vows we have professed to God cannot be dismissed or taken away. By virtue of them, we belong to him and are his. Given that we pray every day for the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and our ordinary, Michael Olson, any claim that we have departed from the Catholic faith is ridiculous. We firmly believe and profess all that the Holy Catholic Church believes, teaches, and proclaims to be revealed by God. Disputes about one man's wishes and man-made rules do not exclude us from the Church. Please know that here we continue our vowed life of prayer and sacrifice in the Discalced Carmelite tradition for the Church and the world, and for all of you, our dear friends and benefactors, including those who may disagree or disapprove of the decisions we have had to make in the best interest of our community. We are profoundly grateful to all those who continue to show us their support and are happy to welcome you to our monastery chapel for private prayer or for the celebration of the beautiful traditional Latin Mass that is now our joy to participate in each day. May the Carmelite saints and martyrs intercede for all of us. Praise be Jesus Christ now and forever. Straight and to the point response from the nuns. And the thing I've noticed about responses to this story is, generally speaking, they line up with about a perception someone has of the state of the church. Most people will admit there's a crisis in the church at this point, but there is. And those who merely view that Francis and the men he surrounds himself with are the problem, and that, man, we'll be fine if we just get back to Benedict XVI, generally view this story with hostility and will side with Bishop Olson. It's usually if you recognize that there's been a systemic problem in the church since well before Vatican II, and that the council, when you read the accounts of what happened at that council, that's when the problem element took power. And when you accept that to some degree, that's usually when you become more sympathetic to the position of the nuns. This is why I usually use the SSPX as a litmus test on a bishop or anybody really on, if you have hostility to the SSPX, and I don't mean like you don't like their position, you recognize that what they're doing is they do what they have to do. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you're hesitant to go to mass with them, but you recognize, I'm not talking that position. That's a fairly moderate position about the SSPX. I mean, accusations of being in schism. When someone says that, I usually view them with suspicion, especially from high-level bishops who should know better. And you see that play out with this story all the time. These nuns need your prayers. The bishop tried to destroy their order by dismissing all the members except the prioress and the novices from the religious state. That's what he tried to do. Thankfully, the nuns had the courage of their convictions to tell him, no, you're not allowed to do that. All right, let's take a look here in the live chat here. Oh, yeah, see, case in point. Somebody just trashing the nuns in my comments. Whatever. You're entitled to your opinion. Let's take a look. Anybody have any final thoughts in here? Please pray for the bishop and pray for the nuns in this story. Pray for Pope Francis and Fernandez and anybody else that I name dropped. Please. Edu says, indeed, neo-modernism was a problem which culminated in Vatican II. Yeah, it was like second phase modernism. First phase of modernism was attempted to be dealt with starting with Pope Gregory the 16th and then Pius IX a little bit, hence why you got the syllabus of errors. And then Leo the 13th, when he wrote Libertas and a whole bunch of these other encyclicals that are all on this channel if you want to listen to them. And then Pius X, right? After Pius X, for some reason, the popes of the day kind of backed off a little bit. They would sometimes issue like shorter statements and shorter teaching documents, correcting the errors of modernists. But the world was changing, and they were trying to, put out fires everywhere they were popping up. Look at what happened with Benedict XV as an example of that during World War I. But it was essentially phase two modernism that just suddenly appeared at Vatican II, because all the bishops and priests who held to the errors were underground. They were taking the oath against modernism, and they were lying when they did it. And then they showed up at Vatican II and took the council over. John the 23rd, with Cardinal Ottaviani, had like a dozen documents ready to go. They thought Vatican II would take 6 weeks. They had a dozen documents ready to go. They thought the bishops would largely approve them. Maybe a minor edits here and there were needed. That's not what happened. The council, at the direction of the assistants, manipulated the bishops to reject those documents out of hand, except for Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the document on the liturgy. The document on the liturgy, which only calls for saying things like the Pater Noster, that's the Our Father in the traditional Mass, and a couple other things in the vernacular. Otherwise, it'd be the same Mass as the traditional Mass. And that document is used as an excuse for getting the new Mass, right? That's how this all played out. And now we are living under the consequences of that, especially now that you see traditionalism as a resurgence, what we call traditionalism, or as just some of us like to call the old faith. And it is taking the most vile turn in our time specifically, beginning with the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate being crushed by Rome right after Francis got in, and now with these sisters who are not going to let themselves be added to the list of groups taken down. You might be thinking, well, Anthony, you're really biased. I am. I am biased towards religious. Nuns especially, but religious in general. People who gave their lives to the church and submitted their lives to Christ to pray for the rest of us. Yeah, I'm biased towards them. I hope to have the heroic virtue just on display in this story with those nuns. All right, folks. If there's any final thoughts on this? Tom Murray says, let no man shake your faith. Yeah, stand your ground when it comes to this stuff. Stand your ground. We're dealing essentially with either heretics or people who have just sort of adopted the view of modernist Rome and should know better, but for whatever reason don't. They tend to come in multiple flavors these days. I do get kind of heated with this story just because I want this story to go away. Honestly, the next time I talk to you about the Arlington Carmelites, I'd love it to be just as an example of other nuns, other religious, following their example and successfully resisting. But instead, this bishop keeps coming out and trying to crush them. And trying to take away arbitrarily the religious vocations of those 7 sisters and trying to destroy a traditional order makes my skin crawl. Yeah, Carol, that's been my attitude has bled over from the secular political world into this. Just don't give ground. We've had enough of them. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. Please pray for the Bishop Olson, especially if he makes you angry, especially in that case. Pray for him. Pray for these nuns. Pray for everybody involved in this in Rome. And for the media outlet, that I started, that article is very biased against them. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.